At exactly 7:42 a.m. on a Tuesday morning in October 2019, security cameras captured what would become one of the most audacious heists in modern history. A standard garbage truck pulled up to an industrial warehouse in a small town outside Phoenix, Arizona. The driver, wearing his usual orange safety vest, stepped out and activated the hydraulic lift. But what went into that truck was not construction debris or office waste. It was $18 million in cash belonging to one of Mexico's most dangerous cartels. 12 hours later, the driver had vanished completely. No phone calls, no bank transactions, no trace on any surveillance system in the country. His name was Leo Morrison, and this is the story authorities desperately tried to bury. Before I walk you through the full story, I just have a small favor to ask. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and let me know in the comments, what city are you watching from? It's always amazing to see how far this audience is reaching. Now let's get back to the story. The morning started like any other for Leo Morrison, a 39-year-old father who had been driving garbage routes for Morrison Waste Management for over 8 years. He serviced the sprawling industrial district that stretched along the dusty outskirts of town, where legitimate businesses mixed with operations that preferred to stay invisible. His supervisor later told investigators that Leo was their most reliable driver, never missed a day, never complained, always finished his routes ahead of schedule, and never asked questions about the strange requests from certain clients. He was the kind of employee who minded his own business, kept his head down, and collected his paycheck every Friday without causing any problems for management. But that Tuesday morning in October was fundamentally different from all the others. The warehouse Leo stopped at belonged to Desert Sun Construction, a company that, according to public records, had not filed a single tax return in over 3 years, despite claiming to operate multiple construction projects across the Southwest. The massive concrete building sat isolated at the end of a dead-end street, surrounded by empty lots, rusted machinery, and the kind of oppressive silence that comes with dangerous secrets. Most drivers avoided this particular pickup, but Leo had been specifically assigned to this route for the past 14 months, handling what his supervisor called special industrial waste that required discretion and reliability. Leo backed his truck up to the loading dock at exactly 7:42 a.m., just like he had done every Tuesday for the past year and 2 months. Security footage from a neighboring auto parts business shows him talking to someone just outside the camera's range near the warehouse entrance. The conversation lasted exactly 4 minutes and 17 seconds, during which Leo appeared calm and professional, while the other person gestured animatedly toward the building interior. Then Leo walked to the back of his truck, activated the hydraulic lift with practiced efficiency, and began loading a single industrial container that looked identical to the dozens he had moved before from this same location. But here is where everything becomes extraordinary, and the magnitude of Leo's planning becomes clear. That container weighed nearly 3 times what Leo's truck was rated to carry safely under normal operating conditions. The hydraulics strained visibly on the surveillance footage, and you can actually see the truck's rear axle compressed dangerously under the massive, unexpected weight. The vehicle tilted backward at an alarming angle that should have triggered safety protocols and automatic shutdowns. No construction debris weighs that much. No legitimate waste material creates that kind of mechanical strain. But $18 million in tightly packed cash bundled in waterproof bags and vacuum-sealed packages? That is exactly what you would expect to see. Leo drove away from the warehouse at 7:51 a.m., moving significantly slower than usual due to the enormous weight in his truck, and taking a route that deviated from his normal pattern. 9 minutes later, his GPS tracker showed an unscheduled stop in an empty field 12 miles from the warehouse down a dirt road that led absolutely nowhere and was not part of any official garbage collection route. The truck remained completely stationary for 23 minutes while Leo presumably transferred the money to another vehicle or hiding place that had been prepared in advance. When investigators finally checked that location weeks later, they found deep tire tracks gouged into the earth, a burned cell phone melted beyond recognition, and something else that made their blood run cold. Scattered around the area were dozens of plastic zip ties, the kind used specifically to bundle large amounts of cash for transport, and a single black latex glove with traces of ink that matched the distinctive dye used on $100 bills. But more disturbing was what forensic experts found when they analyzed the soil samples. Traces of gasoline and burnt paper suggested that Leo had destroyed documents or evidence at this location, possibly including his original identification or emergency backup plans. The crime scene told a story of methodical preparation and execution that went far beyond a simple opportunistic theft. But Leo was far from finished with his carefully orchestrated plan. The real genius of his scheme was just beginning to unfold in ways that would baffle investigators for years. At 9:15 a.m., Leo's truck appeared on traffic cameras entering the downtown core right on schedule, as if absolutely nothing unusual had happened during the previous hour. He made his planned stops at 3 different office buildings, methodically emptying dumpsters, chatting casually with maintenance workers, and even helping an elderly janitor carry bags to the loading area. One witness later told police that Leo seemed unusually cheerful that morning, whistling while he worked and mentioning something about finally being able to take that vacation to see his daughter that he had been planning for months. Another witness, a security guard who had known Leo for years, remembered him checking his watch repeatedly and seeming eager to finish his route quickly, but not in a way that seemed suspicious or out of character. Leo even stopped to buy coffee from his usual food truck and spent 5 minutes talking with the vendor about the weather and local football scores. To everyone who interacted with him that morning, Leo Morrison appeared to be having just another ordinary Tuesday at work, with perhaps a little extra spring in his step. The last confirmed sighting of Leo Morrison was at 11:33 a.m. when he parked his truck at the Morrison Waste Management Depot and walked into the facility carrying what appeared to be his usual work bag. Cameras show him entering the building through the employee entrance, but the footage reveals something that investigators would later realize was highly significant. Leo was carrying a black duffel bag he had never brought to work before, and his usual confident stride seemed hurried, almost urgent, as if he was operating on a strict timeline. He badged in, normally spoke briefly with the receptionist, and walked toward the locker area where drivers typically changed clothes and stored personal items. He never came out of that building. 20 minutes later, a maintenance worker found Leo's uniform neatly folded in his assigned locker, with his identification badge placed carefully on top and his work boots lined up perfectly underneath, as if he was leaving everything exactly as he wanted it to be found. His personal belongings, including his wallet, keys, and cell phone, were completely gone. The mysterious black duffel bag was nowhere to be found and would never be recovered despite extensive searches. Security cameras showed that Leo had not exited through any monitored doorway yet. Somehow he had vanished from a building with only 3 exits, all of which were under constant surveillance. But what happened next sent absolute shockwaves through the investigation and revealed the true scope of Leo's meticulous planning and preparation. At exactly 2:47 p.m. that same day, Leo's 9-year-old daughter Emma was pulled out of Lincoln Elementary School by a woman claiming to be her aunt, visiting from out of state for a family emergency. School records showed no aunt listed anywhere in Emma's emergency contacts, and the teachers had never seen this woman before during the 3 years Emma had attended the school. However, she provided valid identification, a professionally notarized letter from Leo explicitly authorizing the pickup and granting temporary custody, and even knew personal details about Emma that only family members would know. The letter was dated 3 days before the heist and contained specific details about Emma's medical information, dietary restrictions, favorite activities, and even her fear of thunderstorms information that convinced school administrators this was a legitimate family situation. The woman who picked up Emma was later described as professional, well-dressed, and calm, with Emma seeming to recognize and trust her completely. Security footage from the school showed Emma leaving willingly hand in hand with this mysterious woman while carrying a small backpack that appeared to have been packed in advance for travel. 3 days after Leo's disappearance, an anonymous YouTube account uploaded a video that changed everything investigators thought they knew about the case and provided the first real evidence of what had actually been stolen. The footage, clearly filmed from inside a garbage truck during morning hours, showed stacks upon stacks of crisp $100 bills piled high in an industrial container, exactly like the one Leo had loaded from Desert Sun Construction. The timestamp visible on the camera's dashboard matched perfectly with Leo's Tuesday morning route, and the distinctive yellow walls of the warehouse were clearly visible in the background, along with specific industrial equipment that confirmed the location. The video was professionally edited with multiple camera angles, suggesting Leo had set up several recording devices in advance to document his crime. It was viewed over 2 million times in 48 hours and shared across social media platforms before it was mysteriously taken down by persons unknown. But the anonymous account that posted it, despite extensive FBI investigation involving cybercrime specialists and international cooperation with tech companies, it proved to be completely untraceable, routed through multiple proxy servers registered with cryptocurrency payments, and protected by sophisticated encryption that suggested professional-level technical knowledge. The FBI finally launched a full federal investigation when Desert Sun Construction's warehouse mysteriously burned to the ground exactly 1 week after the heist in what fire investigators immediately recognized as professional arson. The fire was so intensely hot it actually melted portions of the concrete foundation and destroyed a full city block of neighboring buildings, forcing the evacuation of dozens of businesses and requiring hazmat teams to contain toxic smoke. Fire investigators found clear traces of military-grade accelerant throughout the structure, but the blaze had completely destroyed any evidence of what had been stored inside those walls and eliminated any possibility of recovering fingerprints, documents, or security footage. Local fire departments later admitted they had never seen a fire burn so hot or spread so quickly, with flames reaching temperatures exceeding 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit and consuming the building in less than 30 minutes. The timing was too perfect to be coincidental, and investigators realized they were dealing with a coordinated operation involving multiple participants with access to sophisticated resources and professional expertise. That is when the real investigation began, and what federal agents discovered was far more sinister and complex than a simple theft. Desert Sun Construction was revealed to be an elaborate front company for the Medellin Norte cartel, one of Mexico's most powerful and ruthless drug trafficking organizations, with operations spanning 6 countries and annual revenues exceeding $5 billion. The warehouse was not storing construction materials or legitimate business inventory, as the company claimed in its sparse public filings. Instead, it served as a sophisticated money laundering operation where millions of dollars in drug proceeds were systematically processed through fake construction contract shell companies and fraudulent invoices before being electronically transferred south across the border to cartel accounts and offshore banks. The $18 million Leo stole represented just one shipment in a massive financial pipeline that moved over $200 million annually through that single location, with similar operations running in dozens of cities across the American Southwest. Each shipment was carefully timed to avoid detection by federal banking regulations and moved through a network of seemingly legitimate businesses that existed only on paper. The money Leo intercepted was destined for cartel operations in Colombia, Venezuela, and Mexico, where it would have funded drug production, weapons purchases, and the corruption of government officials. DEA documents later leaked to investigative journalists revealed that Desert Sun Construction had been under federal surveillance for over 14 months as part of a larger operation called Phoenix Rising that targeted the cartel's entire financial network across multiple states. Federal agents knew about the money laundering operation but were carefully building a comprehensive case against the cartel's leadership structure, hoping to dismantle the entire organization and seize assets worth over $1 billion. They had identified over 50 co-conspirators and were planning coordinated raids across 6 states when Leo's theft completely derailed years of painstaking investigation. The theft forced cartel leaders to abandon their Phoenix operations immediately and allowed dozens of high-level cartel members to escape prosecution by fleeing to countries without extradition treaties. Millions of dollars in additional evidence was destroyed and entire criminal networks disappeared overnight, costing American taxpayers over $10 million in wasted investigative resources. But the theft also revealed something that stunned federal investigators and changed their understanding of the entire case. Leo Morrison had possessed inside information about the cartel's operations that went far beyond what any garbage truck driver should have known, including detailed knowledge of shipment schedules, security procedures, and financial protocols. Phone records subpoenaed by federal investigators showed that in the 3 weeks leading up to the heist, Leo received exactly 17 phone calls from a number registered to Maria Santos, a bookkeeper who worked inside Desert Sun Construction, and had access to the most sensitive financial information. Maria had been secretly feeding information to the DEA about the cartel's money laundering operations for over 6 months, providing crucial details about shipment schedules, security procedures, and the locations of hidden cash storage facilities. She was paid over $50,000 for her cooperation and was promised relocation to witness protection after the planned raids. She was also, investigators discovered with growing amazement, Leo's former girlfriend from high school who had maintained contact with him for over 20 years, despite their very different life paths. They had dated seriously during their senior year and remained friends even after Leo married his ex-wife Sandra and Maria moved to Phoenix for college. Phone records showed they had been in regular contact for months, with conversations lasting up to an hour and often occurring late at night when both were away from their families and co-workers. Maria Santos was found dead in her downtown apartment exactly 5 days after Leo's disappearance, under circumstances that immediately raised suspicions among investigators. The coroner officially ruled her death a suicide by prescription drug overdose, but family members vehemently insisted she had been terrified for weeks before her death and had been frantically making plans to leave town and start a new life somewhere, far away from Phoenix. Her apartment had been ransacked, and her computer hard drive was missing, along with financial records and documents that might have contained information about cartel operations. 2 weeks after the heist, Leo's satellite phone, which he had purchased with cash at an electronics store in Mesa, using a fake name, pinged a cell tower just outside Vancouver, Canada. The signal lasted exactly 8 hours, during which the phone made 3 brief calls to numbers that were later traced to prepaid phones that were immediately discarded after use. Then the satellite phone went permanently dark and was never activated again despite extensive monitoring by both American and Canadian authorities. But when Canadian border authorities conducted an exhaustive search of their immigration and customs records, they found absolutely no evidence that Leo Morrison had ever crossed into Canada using his real identity or any of the known aliases he had previously used. The electronic trail had gone completely cold, leaving investigators with more questions than answers, and forcing them to consider the possibility that Leo had accomplices with sophisticated technical knowledge and international connections. Months passed with no new developments, despite a massive investigation involving over 50 federal agents and cooperation with law enforcement agencies in 12 countries. The cartel leadership, furious about losing $18 million and deeply embarrassed by the security breach that had exposed their Phoenix operation, placed a substantial bounty on Leo's head that grew larger with each passing week. Multiple street sources claimed the reward had reached $2 million and that cartel assassins were actively searching for him across 3 countries using networks of informants and corrupt officials. But despite the enormous financial incentive and the cartel's reputation for finding anyone who crossed them, no one came forward with credible information about Leo's whereabouts. It was as if Leo Morrison had simply vanished from existence, leaving behind only questions, theories, and a trail of clues that led nowhere. Then in March 2020, exactly 5 months after the heist, a mysterious package arrived at the offices of the Phoenix Herald newspaper, addressed to crime reporter Sarah Chen, who had been covering the story since Leo's disappearance. Inside, investigators found a USB drive containing a single video file that would reignite the entire investigation and provide the first direct communication from Leo since his disappearance. The footage showed a man who looked exactly like Leo Morrison sitting in what appeared to be a cheap roadside motel room with generic furniture and faded wallpaper. His face was partially obscured by carefully positioned shadows, but his voice was unmistakably familiar to everyone who knew him, including his former supervisor and co-workers who were brought in to verify the recording. "I did not want to be a hero," the man said, looking directly into the camera with calm determination and no trace of fear or regret. "But that money represents pure evil distilled into currency. Every single dollar was earned through suffering destroyed families and dead children from overdoses. I could not let them move it to destroy more lives. I could not continue being part of that machine of death, even as an unwitting accomplice who was just doing his job. Someone had to take a stand, and I was in the right place at the right time, with the right information to do something meaningful." The video lasted exactly 93 seconds and was filmed in high definition with professional lighting that suggested careful planning and preparation. Technical analysis conducted by FBI digital forensics experts confirmed it was filmed with a standard smartphone camera, but despite extensive effort and consultation with international experts, they could not determine the specific location where it was recorded. The background showed generic motel furnishings that could have been found anywhere across North America, with no identifying marks, logos, or distinctive features that might reveal Leo's location. "If you are looking for me, please stop," the man continued with evident sincerity and what appeared to be genuine concern for the investigators pursuing him. "I am never coming back to my old life. That part of Leo Morrison died the moment I drove away from that warehouse. The money is completely gone, donated anonymously to organizations that fight against drug trafficking and help victims of addiction recover their lives. Consider it a tax on evil that was long overdue and should have been collected years ago." The video concluded with the man holding up a newspaper so the camera could clearly see the front page headlines and date. The paper showed "Forest Fires Rage Across Northern California," and the date printed was February 15, 2020, proving conclusively that the video was filmed months after Leo's disappearance, when the search for him was still active and international. But investigators noticed something else in the background that made them reconsider everything they thought they knew about the case and Leo's current mental state. Barely visible on the motel wall was a small calendar with one specific date circled in bright red ink, June 23rd. That date was Emma Morrison's 8th birthday, still months away when the video was filmed. The FBI traced the package's origin to a mail forwarding service located in Seattle, Washington, but the account had been paid for entirely with untraceable cryptocurrency and registered under a completely fabricated identity that led nowhere when investigators attempted to track down the real person behind it. The mail forwarding company had no security cameras and kept minimal records, making it impossible to identify who had actually dropped off the package. Yet another dead end in a case that seemed designed to frustrate every investigative technique known to modern law enforcement. Meanwhile, Emma Morrison had vanished as completely and mysteriously as her father. School records showed she had been officially withdrawn from Lincoln Elementary School the day immediately after Leo's disappearance, with all the proper paperwork filed by someone claiming to be her maternal grandmother who had legal guardianship documents. But when investigators attempted to contact this grandmother, they made a disturbing discovery that revealed another layer of Leo's careful planning. The grandmother had died 3 years before Emma was even born, and her identity had been stolen to create false documents that were sophisticated enough to fool school administrators and social services. Emma's mother, Sandra Morrison, had divorced Leo 2 years before the heist and moved to Portland, Oregon to start a new life away from what she later described as Leo's increasing paranoia and secretive behavior. When FBI agents arrived at her apartment to conduct interviews, neighbors reported that Sandra had left very suddenly with a young girl and several large suitcases just days after the news of Leo's disappearance broke on local television stations. The landlord later found 3 months' rent payment in cash, stuffed in an envelope, along with a handwritten note apologizing for breaking the lease without proper notice and expressing hope that everything would work out for the best. Further investigation revealed that Sandra Morrison had used her own passport to fly from Portland to Montreal, Canada, with a child passenger listed as Emma Santos, using Maria Santos' surname instead of Morrison. The ticket had been purchased with cash at the airport just hours before departure, suggesting the trip was either spontaneous or part of a previously arranged contingency plan. From Montreal, they had completely vanished into Canada's complex refugee and immigration system, which offered protection for families fleeing domestic violence or criminal organizations. The case consumed enormous resources at the FBI's Phoenix field office for over 18 months, becoming one of the most expensive investigations in the office's history. Federal agents followed potential leads across 6 different countries and spent hundreds of thousands of taxpayer dollars on the investigation. They interviewed over 300 potential witnesses, analyzed thousands of hours of surveillance footage, and coordinated with law enforcement agencies from Mexico to Canada and from Colombia to the Philippines. Interpol issued international alerts, and the case was featured on multiple television shows and true crime podcasts, hoping to generate tips from the public. But despite all their efforts and the involvement of some of the most experienced investigators in federal law enforcement, Leo Morrison remained nothing more than a ghost who had seemingly vanished into thin air. The case file grew to over 2,000 pages filled with dead ends, false leads, and theories that led nowhere. Some veteran investigators theorized that Leo was already dead, killed by cartel assassins within the first few days after the theft, before he could enjoy a single dollar of his stolen fortune. Others believed he was living comfortably under a completely new identity, possibly somewhere in South America, where $18 million could easily buy total invisibility and protection from even the most determined pursuers. But retired FBI profiler Janet Chen, who had spent 30 years studying complex criminal cases and had helped solve some of the most notorious disappearances in American history, developed a very different theory about what had really happened to Leo Morrison. Chen had been brought in as a consultant 6 months after the disappearance, when the case had stalled and investigators were running out of leads to pursue. Leo Morrison was far more intelligent and calculating than anyone gave him credit for. Chen explained to her former colleagues during a briefing that would reshape the entire investigation. He spent years, not months, studying that warehouse operation, learning their security patterns, building trusted relationships, and gathering inside information from multiple sources. This was absolutely not a spontaneous crime of opportunity or a desperate attempt to escape financial problems. This was a meticulously planned operation that was specifically designed to appear completely spontaneous and unpremeditated to investigators who would naturally assume a garbage truck driver lacked the sophistication for such an elaborate scheme. Every single detail was carefully orchestrated to create maximum confusion and misdirection, while Leo established a new identity and disappeared permanently. Chen pointed to substantial evidence that strongly supported her controversial theory and challenged the assumptions that had guided the investigation from the beginning. Bank records revealed that Leo had been systematically withdrawing relatively small amounts of cash from various accounts for over 8 months before the heist. Never enough to trigger federal reporting requirements that would have alerted authorities, but the withdrawals totaled more than $11,000, suggesting careful planning and patience. He had purchased the satellite phone 6 weeks before committing the crime, along with multiple prepaid credit cards and even a sophisticated fake identification document that was never actually used but demonstrated his level of preparation and access to professional forgers. Most significantly, Leo had been extensively researching countries that maintained no extradition treaties with the United States. His personal computer browser history showed repeated searches for visa requirements, cost of living information, and banking regulations for Paraguay, Ecuador, the Philippines, and several other nations known for protecting fugitives from American law enforcement. But the most revealing evidence came from Leo's work computer at Morrison Waste Management, where investigators found deleted files that had been partially recovered by digital forensics experts. The files contained detailed maps of the industrial district financial records for Desert Sun Construction, and even photographs of the warehouse interior that Leo had apparently taken during previous garbage pickups. He had been planning his escape route long before he ever touched that container of money, and had spent months studying every aspect of the operation he intended to rob. Chen also pointed to evidence that Leo had been in contact with identity theft specialists and money laundering experts through encrypted messaging apps that were later found on a secondary cell phone hidden in his apartment. The phone contained conversations about creating new identities, obtaining false documents, and moving large amounts of cash without detection by banking authorities. Leo had been building a network of criminal contacts and gathering expertise that would allow him to disappear completely once he executed his plan. But the biggest breakthrough in understanding Leo's true sophistication came from a completely unexpected source that nobody could have predicted, and that revealed the international scope of his planning. In December 2020, exactly 14 months after the original heist, a construction worker renovating a bridge in Tijuana, Mexico, found a safety deposit box key that had been carefully taped under the bridge's concrete support structure in a location that would only be discovered during major renovation work. The key led investigators to a box in a local Tijuana bank that contained a handwritten letter and a photograph of a man who strongly resembled Leo Morrison, but with significantly darker hair, a full beard, and different facial structure that suggested possible plastic surgery. The letter was addressed simply to anyone who finds this, and the handwriting was later confirmed through analysis to match samples from Leo's employment records and personal documents. The message was brief, but revealing, and provided the first direct evidence of Leo's motivations and future plans. The money is completely safe and is being put to excellent use helping people the cartel has harmed through their drug operations. Stop wasting time and resources looking for me. Start looking at the real criminals who are still operating freely and destroying communities across America. I am never coming back, and I am never going to be found because I have become someone else entirely. The photograph told an even more intriguing story that opened up entirely new possibilities about Leo's location and current status, while raising questions about how extensively he had altered his appearance. Computer analysis of the photograph revealed it had been taken in Valparaiso, Chile, based on distinctive architectural features that were clearly visible in the background, including a specific church tower and colonial-era buildings that architectural experts were able to identify with certainty. Chilean authorities conducted an extensive search of their immigration records, but found no evidence that anyone named Leo Morrison had legally entered their country during the relevant time period using his real name or any of the known aliases associated with the case. However, they did discover records of an American man matching Leo's general physical description who had purchased a small fishing boat with cash approximately 3 months after the Phoenix heist. The boat was registered under the name David Chen and was specifically designed for long-distance ocean travel with extended fuel capacity and advanced navigation equipment that would allow for international voyages. The purchase was made through a Chilean intermediary who paid cash and provided minimal documentation that met the country's relaxed requirements for boat registration. That boat, along with its mysterious owner, completely disappeared from Chilean waters and was never seen again despite extensive searches by Chilean Coast Guard and cooperation with maritime authorities in neighboring countries. The boat was equipped with satellite communication equipment and had enough supplies for extended ocean travel, suggesting Leo might have been planning to reach a country with even stronger protection for fugitives, or possibly a location where he could live permanently without any government oversight. By early 2021, the FBI made the difficult decision to officially suspend active investigation into Leo Morrison's disappearance and the theft of $18 million. The case technically remained open in their files, but no new resources were allocated, and no agents were assigned to pursue additional leads unless significant new evidence emerged. The destroyed Desert Sun construction warehouse was eventually demolished completely, and the valuable land was sold to a legitimate commercial developer who built a modern shopping center that brought jobs and legitimate business to the area. The Medellin Norte cartel quietly moved their sophisticated money laundering operation to a different location and significantly increased their security measures to prevent any similar thefts in the future. They hired former military personnel to guard their operations and implemented electronic surveillance systems that would make another theft nearly impossible. They never made any public statements acknowledging the theft or their substantial financial losses, maintaining their carefully cultivated reputation for being completely invincible and all-knowing. But people who lived and worked in the industrial district surrounding the former warehouse location have never forgotten what happened there, and some claim the story is far from over. Every Tuesday morning, at exactly 7:42 a.m., someone places a completely empty industrial container at the exact spot where the Desert Sun construction warehouse once stood. The container sits there in perfect silence for exactly 23 minutes, the precise amount of time Leo's truck remained stopped in that empty field on the day of the heist. Then, just as mysteriously as it appeared, the container vanishes without leaving any trace behind and without being seen by any of the numerous security cameras that now monitor the area. Security cameras from multiple businesses have captured this strange weekly ritual dozens of times over the past several years, but the person responsible has never been clearly identified or apprehended, despite the area's heavy security coverage. They wear different clothing each time they appear, arrive in different vehicles that are always reported stolen within hours, and somehow manage to avoid showing their face clearly to any surveillance camera. The person appears to have intimate knowledge of the security systems and camera blind spots, suggesting either inside information or professional surveillance training. Local police have completely given up investigating what they now call the Tuesday ritual, after spending months trying to catch the person responsible. The container never contains anything illegal, and no actual crime is being committed, so they have decided to focus their limited resources on more pressing matters. But longtime residents of the area whisper among themselves that the person placing the container is Leo Morrison himself, still operating in the shadows, still playing an elaborate game with law enforcement, and still managing to outwit everyone who has tried to catch him. They point to small details that only someone intimately familiar with Leo's original routine would know. The precise timing that matches his old garbage route, the specific type of industrial container he always used, the 23-minute duration that perfectly matches his unexplained stop in the field. Some residents claim they have seen a man matching Leo's description, watching the area from a distance, but he always disappears before anyone can get close enough to confirm his identity. The truth about Leo Morrison is probably both simpler and more complex than any theory investigators have developed over the years of pursuing him. He was an ordinary man who found himself in an extraordinary situation and chose to take action against an organization that was systematically poisoning his community with drugs and violence. He planned carefully, studied every detail, executed his plan with precision, and disappeared so completely that even the most sophisticated law enforcement agencies in the world could not find him. Whether he is currently alive or dead wealthy, or struggling, hiding in fear, or living openly under a new identity somewhere far away, nobody knows for certain. But here is what we absolutely know happened that Tuesday morning in October. $18 million in blood money never reached its intended destination. A powerful cartel suffered a humiliating defeat and significant financial losses. A small-town garbage truck driver became a legend who inspired others to fight back against seemingly impossible odds. And somewhere in the world, Emma Morrison is growing up with the knowledge that her father chose to risk everything to strike a blow against evil, even though it meant leaving her behind. The empty container still appears every Tuesday morning at 7:42 a.m., exactly as it has for years, and Leo Morrison remains gone, but certainly not forgotten. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one.